This woman's crimes were so horrific that she became the first female in the history of France to receive a full life sentence. In 2022, 12-year-old Lola disappeared after school in Paris, and security footage from the apartment building where she lived with her family showed her walking inside with 27-year-old Dabia Ben-Kirid following closely behind. Hours later, Lola's body was found stuffed inside a plastic storage box in the lobby of that same building. Investigators say Ben-Kirid lured the girl into her own sister's apartment, who lived upstairs, where she forced Lola to shower, taped her face, stabbed her repeatedly, and subjected her to what the judge called true torture, ultimately killing her through asphyxiation before eventually decapitating her. Ben-Kirid initially confessed, then kept changing her story, and even showed complete indifference when confronted with photos of the gruesome crime. In 2025, she became the first woman in French history to receive a whole life sentence, a punishment previously reserved for only 4 men. The tragedy deepened when Lola's father died in 2024 from alcohol-related complications brought on by the grief of losing his daughter. At 89 years old, Alice and Ellen Kessler, the iconic twin performers who spent decades dancing in perfect sync, chose to die the same way they lived, side by side. On November 17, 2025, the twins underwent a medically assisted death together inside their home near Munich, a procedure they had planned, consented to, and carried out themselves, using life-ending medication supplied legally through Germany's Right to Die framework. Police found no signs of foul play, a doctor and a lawyer were involved, and officials said the decision was well considered with no evidence of crisis or coercion. Assisted suicide has been legal in Germany since a landmark 2020 ruling that affirmed a person's constitutional right to a self-determined death, as long as the act is voluntary and self-administered. After a lifetime of shared stages, shared fame, and shared identity, the Kessler twins made one final synchronized exit, even requesting that their ashes be placed in the same urn. In October of 2024, Micah Smith took his 3 young children, ages 2, 4, and 8, on a 9-mile hike in Utah that authorities described as extremely difficult and dangerous, especially as a major storm was rolling in. Court records say Smith failed to check the weather and continued climbing, even after sending photos of the incoming storm to his wife, who urged him to turn back. Investigators say he refused, later telling police he was comfortable hiking in the dark without lights. By the time they reached the summit around 6 p.m., hail and snow had started falling. The family began descending, but only made it about 600 feet before one child fell and struck their head. At that point, Smith decided to shelter in place overnight with the children, despite worsening weather and inadequate clothing. During the night, prosecutors say the children repeatedly said they were cold, exhausted, and wanted to go home. One child allegedly begged Smith to turn back earlier, saying she was afraid she might not survive, but he refused, calling the hike a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Court documents state Smith later claimed he performed CPR on his son overnight and instructed his daughter to continue the CPR before leaving his children behind. When search and rescue teams located Smith the next day, he was all alone and appeared completely unconcerned about his kids, telling responders he believed one of his children was already dead. A helicopter crew later found the 3 children together, severely hypothermic and inadequately clothed. All 3 children ultimately survived, though 2 were in critical condition, and one had a core body temperature of 63 degrees Fahrenheit that led to a stroke and emergency brain surgery. Smith was later charged with aggravated child abuse and child torture, with prosecutors requesting no bail, arguing he repeatedly chose to continue, despite warnings from the children, their mother, and the worsening weather. Before he became famous, Vanilla Ice claims he survived a brutal stabbing and a near-fatal nightclub attack. When he was 16, he got caught in the middle of a gang fight in South Dallas and was stabbed 5 times, one wound narrowly missing his heart. Doctors reportedly said the blade came so close that another half-inch would have killed him. Months later, he was nearly beaten to death outside a club after a show, leaving him with permanent nerve damage in his arm. This doll belonging to a 5-year-old girl has been watching over her gravesite since her death in 1912. In April of 2001, 20-year-old Branson Perry completely vanished from his father's home in Skidmore, Missouri. He told a friend he was stepping outside to put a pair of jumper cables into the shed, but was never seen again. His van, wallet, and all personal belongings were left behind. Despite searches, interviews, and 2 decades of investigation, no remains have ever been found, and no one has ever been charged. To this day, Branson Perry's disappearance remains one of Missouri's most haunting unsolved cases. This photo shows 15-year-old Preston Porter Jr. reading a Bible as he's led by rope toward his own execution by a lynch mob in Colorado in 1900. He'd been held and tortured for 4 days, beaten until he finally confessed to killing a white girl after police told him his father and brother would also be lynched if he didn't comply. Still a child, Preston was denied a trial and handed over to a crowd that had already decided his fate. He was tied to a stake and burned alive in public as excited spectators watched. Despite the coerced confession, his age, and the brutality involved, Preston was never posthumously exonerated. No official apology was issued, no conviction was overturned, and no one was held accountable. The rarest vids ever taken, Part 5. Here's a video of a camera obscura, a rare effect where a tiny gap in the blinds turns the room into a pinhole camera. Light from outside passes through the small opening and projects a real upside-down image of the scenery onto the ceiling or wall. Some people even make their own, like experimental photographer Matthew Stern, who once projected a live image of the Eiffel Tower onto a wall in a Paris apartment. This is one of the only known video recordings of the golden langur, a rare monkey that Himalayan tribes have long considered to be sacred. The species works extra hard to avoid human contact, making them extremely difficult to observe in the wild. This adorable puppy named Narwhal was born with an extra tail on his forehead. The cause of the extra tail hasn't been determined, but biologists theorize it's the remnants of a parasitic twin. Here's the incredibly rare video of a sperm whale surfacing with a giant squid in its mouth. Their battles usually happen over a mile deep in total darkness, and the squid is normally torn apart or swallowed long before the whale reaches daylight. In more than a century of ocean filming, very few moments like this have ever been recorded. This was the moment an American tourist realized she was in serious danger. While riding the Rail Runner mountain coaster in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, 2 adult black bears stepped almost directly onto the track in front of her. The coaster cannot be steered, stopped, or exited, leaving her a sitting duck as the bears stared her down from just a few feet away. But she was extremely lucky the bears showed curiosity rather than aggression, a common response when black bears don't feel threatened or have become accustomed to human activity. Wildlife officials later warned the situation could have turned fatal in seconds if the bears had reacted differently. Here's a video of a man playing with a blue-ringed octopus, completely oblivious that he's handling one of the most lethal animals on the planet. The tiny octopus contains tetrodotoxin, a venom powerful enough to kill an adult human within minutes, causing total paralysis while leaving the victim fully conscious and aware of what's happening. A single bite can shut down the lungs, stopping breathing as the body becomes unable to move or cry for help. There's no antidote, and survival depends entirely on immediate artificial ventilation until the toxin wears off. Even worse, blue-ringed octopuses often bite painlessly, meaning the man wouldn't even realize he's been bitten until his muscles begin to fail. In 2012, Florence Welch of Florence and the Machine nearly died from an undiagnosed ectopic pregnancy, which happens when a fertilized egg implants outside the uterus, usually in a fallopian tube, where it can't grow and can rupture suddenly, causing severe internal bleeding. She went on stage while bleeding internally, thinking it was normal pain, and later learned her fallopian tube had ruptured, leaving what doctors described as a Coke can's worth of blood inside her abdomen. She required emergency surgery to remove the tube and stop the internal bleeding. Florence later said it was the closest she's ever come to dying by far. In 2023, 16-year-old Bryce Brooks from Atlanta jumped into the ocean in Pensacola to save 4 younger kids he'd never met who were being pulled out by a strong rip current. He managed to help get them to safety, but the current dragged him under before he could escape. A family friend, 67-year-old Charles Johnson II, rushed in attempting to save Bryce but was also pulled under. The 4 children survived, but Bryce and Charles didn't make it, and both were later honored as heroes for sacrificing their lives to save others. This was the moment when a woman's dark past finally caught up with her after 4 decades.
How you doing, Miss Sharon? Pretty good.
Uh-oh, they're coming for you, Sharon! They don't want me. They want Reggie. What's up?
Well, we're here for you, ma'am. Definitely here for you.
Ma'am, we're not.
I'm so sorry.
No, you're okay.
I'm so sorry.
In 1983, Deborah Newton, aka Sharon, vanished with her 3-year-old daughter Michelle, telling the child's father she was taking her to Georgia and never returning. Michelle was raised under a false name, never told she was a missing child, and never told her biological father spent decades believing his little girl was gone forever. For years, Deborah was listed on the FBI's most wanted parental kidnapping list, hunted on paper while she quietly rebuilt her life. But the case eventually went cold as Michelle's name was removed from national databases and the trail went dark. Deborah remarried, lived as Sharon in Florida, and even her husband had no idea he was married to a fugitive who had erased a child's identity. Then, more than 40 years later, officers approached her as she was walking her dog in the neighborhood and arrested her, exposing the dark secret she had lived inside of for most of her adult life. She now faces a custodial interference charge in Kentucky, a crime with no statute of limitations, while the daughter she kidnapped learned that her entire life was built on a lie, and that her father had been searching and waiting for her all along. In 2020, Tim Bleefnick appeared on Family Feud and joked that the biggest mistake he made at his wedding was saying "I do."
What's the biggest mistake you made at your wedding? Honey, I love you, but said I do. Not my mistake. Not my mistake. I love my wife.
But 3 years later, in February of 2023, his estranged wife Rebecca Bleefnick was found shot 14 times in their home while their 3 young boys were upstairs. The couple had apparently been going through a bitter divorce, and Tim went to the extreme to deal with it. He was arrested, convicted of first-degree murder, and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When 36-year-old Heather McManamy was diagnosed with terminal cancer, she began writing dozens of greeting cards for her young daughter to open in the years after she was gone, covering birthdays, graduations, heartbreaks, and even her wedding day. Each card was filled with love, jokes, and advice, allowing her daughter to still receive words of comfort and celebration long after Heather's death in 2015. It was her way of staying present for every milestone she knew she wouldn't live to see.